Woohoo! Okay. So, first slide is about Diversify, which is my book. And if you go to our website, diversify.org, you see lots of details and information there. So, if we go to the first slide, this is a video that we made, which really sums up the essence of what the book is about. This video will run for about 3 minutes, and then I'll be back to talk.
Action. Oh, okay. I'm ready now. Are men better at running businesses than women? No. Definitely not, because my mum's great at running a business. There's no one better than us because we're all the best. A woman can be just as good at leading, say, a phone company as a man.
I think we need to make it more equal and let people know that girls can be as good as boys at anything.
Do you agree with gay marriage being legal?
Yeah, I do.
Of course. If you're a girl marrying a girl, then yeah, you should.
Some people think it's not okay, but I think it's okay. It doesn't matter about their gender or their race.
Like the ladies can go shopping together with men, and then Tyler, you have to stay at home. If you want to go with someone, you could go with someone, whoever you like. But if they're married to someone else, you can't do it.
Do you think some races or ethnic groups are born less intelligent than others?
No. Just because I'm this colour doesn't make me any worse, doesn't make me look better. It makes me look like me.
All it means that you have a different skin color, and what does skin color mean? Nothing.
I have autism and ADHD.
Some people are being mean about me and telling lies.
One of my best friends has a disability. I have 5 friends with disabilities.
She can't see, but she doesn't need walking sticks. She just wears funny glasses. Even though you can't do something, maybe you can have another job that you can do. There's Anissa, Chaya,
Rayan, Ishan.
I got 7 friends. Well, she's the best friend I ever had.
I have Gracie. I have lots of other friends.
Me.
Including this guy.
I'm your brother, so of course I'm your friend.
We should turn the lights off. Be kind to each other and share, and just share.
Don't be angry. Just keep calm.
It's okay to be different. You need to think about things. There are problems in this world that can be solved if we just think things through. And I think that's all people need to do sometimes.
So I think it's fair to say when you watch that video that the kids are all right, and actually what we need to do is learn from them. If we all thought like that, the world would be a much better and easier place. We move to the next slide. So in Diversify, I open the book with one of my favorite quotes, which is a quote by William Sloane Coffin. William Sloane Coffin was a civil rights activist in the 60s, a very good friend of Martin Luther King's. And what's interesting about Sloane Coffin is he came from one of the wealthiest families in the East Coast of America, but decided to spend his time fighting for people that were less privileged than himself. And the quote is, "Diversity may be the hardest thing for a society to live with, and perhaps the most dangerous thing for society to be without. And I think when you look at what's going on in our world right now, his words are as important today as they were when he uttered them over 60 years ago. If we move to the next slide. So in Diversify, I partnered with Oxford University, and we have a lot of up-to-date research and data on where we are with the various disenfranchised groups and how we better integrate them into society, and why, when we do so, it's not just better for the individuals themselves, but also better for society and business at large. And so today I'm going to focus my talk much more on what the economic benefits are in terms of business and what the research suggests, and why for any business leader that wants to future-proof their industry, their business, and wants to be around and wants to be a leader in their industry for years to come, this is an area that they have to get right. Next slide. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a personal story. So I am the daughter of Ghanaian immigrants. My parents came here in the 70s. I grew up in the 80s in East London. And when I was a child, my grandmother died. And so my great-grandmother, who is the woman in this image, became my de facto grandma. She was a powerhouse of a woman. She didn't speak English, but fortunately, I spoke our mother tongue Tree. And I would be so excited by her visits as a kid, because she would come over and she would tell me all of these amazing stories. Our culture is steeped in mythology and folklore that's passed down generation to generation via an oral tradition. And one of the stories that she used to tell me, next slide, is the story of Anansi the spider, the original Spider-Man, may I add. Anansi's story is really interesting because he starts out at the bottom of the animal kingdom and decides he wants to figure out how to rise to the top. Now, the thing with being at the bottom of society is it means you have to learn how to innovate. You have to learn how to turn no's into yeses, the kinds of yeses that many of us take for granted. And so Anansi goes along to the sky god, and he decides that he wants to figure out how to rise to the top. And perhaps the best way to do it is to own the most precious item in the animal kingdom, which are the stories of all wisdom, which happen to belong to the sky god. So he goes along to the sky god and he says, I'd like to buy your stories. And the sky god says, one, they're not for sale, and two, even if they were, what would a lowly spider like you do with them? As I said, the thing with being at the bottom of society is it means you have to learn how to turn no's into yeses. And so Anansi persists. And at this point, the sky god is on the back foot. And he relents. And he says to him, okay, I'm going to give you a chance. This is a chance that I've given kings and queens from all of the surrounding kingdoms. They've all failed. There's no way you will succeed. As I said, when you're at the bottom of society, you have to figure out how to innovate. So Anansi goes away and he somehow manages to complete the impossible. And he takes the items along to the sky god. And the sky god is so impressed that he not only gifts him with the stories, he also anoints him as the king of the animal kingdom. And Anansi generously shares the stories with the rest of humanity. And here I am, thousands of years later, retelling the tale. Now, the reason I reference the Anansi stories, there are 2 points that I think are vital for success. The first is equal opportunity, and the second is self-belief. Because even though the sky god didn't believe in Anansi, he still gave him the same opportunity that he had given the seemingly worthier candidates. He still gave him a shot anyway. Unfortunately, though the sky god didn't believe in Anansi, Anansi believed in himself. And I believe when you have equal opportunity coupled with self-belief, anything is possible. So what any business leader, what any organization needs to be asking themselves is, am I creating the kind of environment that fosters equal opportunity? And am I also creating the kind of culture that allows my team to truly believe in themselves? If I am, then anything indeed is possible for my business. So when we talk about inclusion, over the last few years, it has become the zeitgeist. It's become the thing that all businesses are talking about, and companies are wanting to figure out how to get this stuff right. Now, obviously, because it's embedded in years of unconscious bias and conditioning and prejudice, it's something that we're really uncomfortable addressing. And these are issues that impact us socially, that we have to address in order to become all that we can be professionally. So it means we're dealing with social issues in the workplace, which is very uncomfortable indeed. But what shows how much this is at the forefront of thinking in business is the topic of the theme of Davos this year. You know, Davos is the gathering of the global elite, and inclusive business was one of the core themes at Davos this year, where the leaders at Davos were realizing that the world is changing and the old status quo of a lot for the few and not much for the many is being turned on its head, and that actually that model is no longer sustainable. And if they want to be in positions of power still going forward, they have to figure out how to bring those that have been excluded for so long. And I think what's also interesting about that, if we move on to the next slide, I think what's also interesting about that is how that impacts, how that thinking impacts the future of work. So we'll go to the next slide. As we know, technology is going to completely change the way we do business in the future and how we actually work. Technology means that you no longer need to be in an office. You can work in silo from your home and connect to the world. Next slide. In terms of what employees no longer want to be only committed to one company. Yes, they want to have a core employer, but they also want to have portfolio careers where they're doing multiple things that bring them passion and allows them to fulfill their potential and experience their various talents. So this also means that the role of business is going to be completely different, and in terms of what employees expect from companies is different. The next thing as well in terms of the future of work is the impact next slide, the impact that that's going to have on equality. More and more women and men are expecting flexible hours and want to be able to work from home and want to be able to still have that work-life balance, which for the past perhaps 20, 30 years, as more women have been moving into the workplace, has been ignored, really, and maybe has been the casualty of women coming into the workplace in large numbers. Women are now saying that's not good enough. We want that balance. And what's interesting is men are also saying the same. So again, this is where when we start looking at diversity and inclusion, it not only is the smart thing to do in terms of the bottom line, we all know that. I'll talk about the research in a bit soon, but also it's what your employees are going to be demanding from you going forward. Next slide. Which is why the great and the good at Davos made this one of the key themes of this year's summit. So I want to talk a bit more about my story. Next slide. I grew up in an area called Walthamstow. Not sure if anyone from Walthamstow is on the webinar, but hello if you are. And what was interesting about Walthamstow is when I was growing up there, it was one of the poorest areas in London. But it was incredibly multicultural and incredibly mixed. And it was also at the beginning of gentrification in that area. So you had a lot of wealthier kids moving into our neighborhood and therefore coming to our school. Next slide. And so my school really was like a working class version of the UN. We were from all walks of life, and diversity and difference was actually an asset. Just to say, that was not me at school. I didn't dress like that when I used to go to school. I recently went back to visit. Next slide. From there, I went to work at KISS FM when KISS was becoming a legal radio station. And the whole point of KISS was about connecting the young people of London through the power of music. So diversity and difference was something that was a core part of my working life, and something that I thought was second nature to me. Next slide. I then went to Channel 4. Next slide, where I was getting to interview people from all walks of life. And like most television talent, I moved to America, and I wanted to figure out how to break the American market, as it were, which is what most British TV talent want to do. And one day I was working and a young man appeared on set who I immediately noticed, who I was immediately intimidated by, and he had tattoos, and I made all these assumptions about who he was. Anyway, he could sense my discomfort and he was going out of his way to seem non-threatening. And so that moment, I was able to really understand this issue from the other side, because as a Black woman, as a working class woman, I'd always looked, daughter of immigrants, I'd always looked at it as being on the receiving end, as opposed to doing it myself. So I'm glad to say I went and spoke to this man, and yes, he hadn't had the easiest start in life, but our sound man had taken him on as an apprentice and was a lot more open-minded than me. And I couldn't help but think how difficult it was going to be for this kid to fulfill his potential if even somebody like me was prejudging him. And that's what made me want to start a conversation around these issues, these uncomfortable issues that none of us want to address, but we have to in order to move things forward. Because the thing with discrimination is it not only negatively impacts the people that we're discriminating against, it also negatively impacts society. Next slide. Because we have no idea. It may be that person that has the solutions to some of the problems we see ourselves faced with. When we look at the level of untapped potential there is in our society, we're only scratching the surface of our human capabilities, because we're only really mining the talents of a tiny, tiny segment of society. So in Diversify, next slide, I have a theory that I'm calling 6 degrees of integration. These are 6 steps on how you can better connect with the other, whatever that other is for you. The first is to challenge your ism. And if you go on diversify.org, we have an ism calculator that we did in partnership with Oxford University, where you can go on and actually see what your unconscious bias may be. It's completely private, so please go and fill that out. The second is to check your circle. I think this one is really important. Look at your social group. If it is homogenous, if it's only people that look like you, think like you, believe the same things as you do, come from a similar background, chances are you're going to have a linear outlook. In checking your circle, if it's not as diverse as it should be, I would hope you would create a new connection. In creating a new connection, hopefully you change your mind. In changing your mind, this one I think is really important, is to celebrate difference. And then the 6th is to champion the cause. Tell other people, get them also doing it. If we move further down, I'm going to skip through some slides because we're running out of time in order to be able to. So actually, go back one. That is what the ISM calculator looks like on the website. Let's skip, keep going. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Keep going. I think this is, go back. Back. Back, yeah, perfect. No, back one more, yeah, this is perfect. Question every leader has to ask themselves is everyone in the room? And if everyone is not in the room, why not? What are you going to do to address that? So please go and look at your teams. If they're not diverse, make it your mission today to start to do something about that. The next is our Diversify dinners. We've been hosting them all over the country. If you go on the website, you can download your toolkit and maybe perhaps host your own, or you can contact our organization and we can organize one for you. Then what I would say, next slide, is this is really important. We have to accept that diversity and inclusion, it's not easy. Cultural change is never easy, but when everybody in the company understands the benefits, then it's worth going through that discomfort to really yield those fantastic rewards that are available to you as a business if you get this right. Next slide. This is the quote that I'll close with, which is another one of my favorites. This is by Thomas Berry. And he says, diversity is the magic. It is the first manifestation, the first beginning of the differentiation of a thing and of a simple identity. The greater the diversity, the greater the perfection. And if we move to the next slide, that's it. So thank you. If you have any questions, please go ahead and ask. We've got about 10 minutes or so. Look forward to answering them.
Yes, thank you, June. It was really, really interesting. Waiting for your question. Don't hesitate. Please ask whatever you want to ask us. We have 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, we have 7.
We have 7.
Mm-hmm. You can close.
Okay, someone raised hand. please, if I can ask you to use the Q&A box, it will be really helpful for us. Okay, we have one now. Can you see it, June?
Yes. Do I click on it?
Yes, you can click on it directly.
Fiola Francis, what advice do you have for people whose employees aren't embracing diversity and inclusion? Well, I would say the first thing is to make sure that you go to the leadership. This stuff has to start from the leadership. So the boss needs to be bought into it. And if your boss isn't, maybe you're the one that can help your boss. And what I would do is I would arm yourself with data and research and say to your boss, this is what's happening. This is where our industry is heading. We're one of the companies that isn't even looking at this, and I would really like to help you get this right. And then once the boss has bought into it, then do a group meeting with the rest of the business and allow them to define what it is that they're going to do to try and get this thing right so that they don't feel imposed upon. So that's what I would say to you, Fiola. Okay, we have another one.
Actually, we have two other questions, Jude, but in the chat box. So let's give in the chat box. I will read them for you if you want.
Okay. Around the UK, supporting groups together. I do lots. So if you follow me on Twitter, Vivian, at June Sarpong, I'm always tweeting what I've got coming up. How do you take diversity to the next level and create a truly inclusive environment? I think that's to Samvita. I think that is about really having honest conversations. Until we are truly honest about this stuff, nothing changes. To Vivian, in fashion and experience ageism all the time, what advice do you? Yes, well, fashion is a very ageist industry. It's a very ist industry in general. I would say own your experience, lead with that. So if it is the elephant in the room where someone might be thinking, oh, that person might be too old or not fashionable enough, I would own it and say, I've been in the industry for this long, I've been able to do this, I've been able to see these changes, this is the level of talent that I bring because of my experience. Use examples, and Anna Wintour, the Grace Coddingtons, people who've been around for so long that their work is truly unrivaled as a result. If you look at the heads of the fashion houses, whether that's Mr. Armani or Mucha Prada, all of these people are older, and their work has gotten better as a result. So I would really lead with that. What do you think the impact will be in business? Oh, well, I think the business that do not embrace diversity, I think a lot of them won't be here in the future. Because if you look at what's going on with the global economy, there are so many countries that were once, colonies of the UK or enclaves of America and so on, that are now having economies that will be bigger than ours. India is a great example of this, and even Africa is on the rise. I just don't think you can get away with it in the same way. So if you want to be a business that's around 50 years from now, 100 years from now, which many of the great companies are, if you're looking at the Coca-Colas and the Pepsis and so on of this world, this is something you got to get right, because now people are checking. Who's championing diversity well? Feminich. So Feminich is a company that produces the majority of the world's fragrances. So anything that has a fragrance in it, whether that be a candle or chocolate sauce or a perfume, you name it, any fragrance, this company tends to be the ones behind making those scents. And they have a real visionary leader, Gilbert Gosquin, who has just been fantastic in making sure that he promotes diversity at all levels. So not just ethnic or gender diversity, but disability, looking at how the company tracks social mobility. I think he's a really great example of a huge business trying to get this stuff right.
June, we are having some other question in the Q&A box. Actually, we have 4 more questions in the Q&A box. So if you want to have a look and see which one you can answer.
What advice do you have for people who have done that? Anonymous attendee, how do we deal with the defense? Oh, yeah. How do we deal with the defensive and denial syndrome among some executives who may feel they're being attacked when diversity is raised? That is a brilliant question, whoever you are. I would say the way to deal with that is about how you pose the question. It's not about finger pointing, because the minute you finger point, then the defensive mechanism goes up. Instead, it's about expressing somebody's lived experience and expressing the frustration it feels that when you're diverse talent and you are constantly experiencing microaggressions, or you are being marginalized within an industry, within your company, or you're not progressing at the same rates as your white colleagues or your able-bodied colleagues, or your privately educated colleagues. You can say those things in an honest, authentic way that isn't finger pointing. And then what you add to that is, as a business, you're losing out because I have all of this stuff to give, but I'm only being utilized with a small percentage of my ability. And I would do it that way. And I think you get better results with that. Amanda Ogier, what are purpose-driven creative enterprises? We're keen to know as a business what we can do to get more businesses like us having more open conversation around inclusivity. Well, I think it's about also arming yourself. I keep saying this with data. This isn't a nice thing to do, it's a smart thing to do. You know, we just take disability, for example. 20% of the population has some kind of disability. If you are a B2C business, that's nuts if you're not specifically coming up with products that are inclusive of them. You know, even simple things like there's a wonderful soap brand that has Braille on the bottles. How about that? You know what I mean? Like, it's just a no-brainer. We so create these things without even thinking about the whole. Then we have Anonymous. What type of organizations are good to join here in the UK to raise awareness? Oh, there are lots. I think business in the community, if you are a business. I think supporting organizations like Scope or the Amos Bursary. Oh, there are so many. As a Black woman, what is the most reoccurring challenge you face getting ahead in your industry? I think it's being underestimated, for sure. But, you know, sometimes you have to play the long game. And, you know, I've been around for a long time now. So I've learned how to navigate these spaces, as it were. And also I'm very easygoing, so I don't take things personally. I think that's really important. You know, if you look at any kind of discrimination, it's not personal. It's about what you represent in the whole. And when you are able to detach yourself from that, it doesn't hurt as much. Instead, you want to figure out how to unravel the systemic reasons as to why this kind of discrimination exists. I think we are probably out of time. I think of one last one, and then
yes, one last one. We have one in the chat box.
What impact do you think? I think we've done. Will you be able to share your slides with us? Yeah, happy to share those slides. Yeah, I think you can share those, can't you, Claudia?
Perfect, I will, definitely. Well, thank you, June, for your time. It was really inspiring, really interesting. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it. As I said earlier, we will have, for 5 of you, we will send over 5 copies of the book. So please check your inbox as soon as possible after the webinar. If you have any additional question for June, please contact us at marketing@positiveluxury.com. We'll forward the questions, and we'll get back to you shortly. And our next webinar will be on the 2nd of July with Julia Els, and it will be about plastic problems and solutions. And thank you again for attending the webinar. Thank you very much, June.
Thank you.
And see you soon.
Brilliant.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye. Lovely.